This week on Who Deserves to Be Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame podcast, we look at the case for putting Sonic Youth into the Hall. This week, we take a look at putting the New York City-based group Sonic Youth into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. By the way, they got their name by taking Fred Smith of MC5's nickname Sonic and reggae artist Big Youth's last name to create Sonic Youth. The core of the group from their beginning in 1981 to their breakup in 2011 was Kim Gordon on bass, Thurston Moore on lead guitar, and Lee Ronaldo on rhythm guitar. Steve Shelley joined on drums starting back in 1985 after the group tried out a few different drummers in their first few years. There have also been other people who have played with the group over their run, specifically Ann DeMarinis, Richard Edson, Bob Burt, Jim Sclavunos, Jim O'Rourke, and Mark Ibold. The group has been eligible for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame since 2007. So, with all that said, let us look at their commercial and critical success and then who they influenced, followed by the reasons why they should or should not be inducted, and whether anybody would care if they ever got back together for a concert or an album. To the tail of the tape we go. Sonic Youth had 15 studio albums, 4 compilation albums, and 8 EPs. Of those 15 albums, only 2 of them hit the top 40 in America, 1994's experimental Jet Set, Trash, and No Star, which hit number 34, and 2009's The Eternal, which topped off at number 18. In the UK, 5 hit the top 40 with experimental Jet Set going to number 10 and 1992's Dirty getting to number 6. Sonic Youth have also appeared on 17 soundtrack albums, put out 8 bootleg albums, and also have 10 experimental albums on their Sonic Youth Recordings record label. 5 of their 15 albums have sold over 100,000 copies, with Dirty being their bestseller at 329,000 copies sold in America. I would have figured it would have been the album Goo, but I digress. Out of 21 released singles, they only had 5 singles chart in America. 1988's Teenage Riot hit number 20, 1990's Cool Thing hit number 7, 1992's 100% hit number 4, 1994's Bull in the Heather hit number 13, with its follow-up single Superstar hitting number 26. In the UK, only 3 songs hit the top 40, with all 3 topping off in the 20s. 1988's album Daydream Nation has been put into the United States National Recording Registry. Daydream Nation also ranks at number 171 on Rolling Stone magazine's Greatest Albums of All Time list, with 1990's Goo ranking in at number 358. Their 1988 song, Teenage Riot, ranks at number 157 on Rolling Stone magazine's Greatest Songs of All Time list. Kim Gordon is also on Rolling Stone magazine's Greatest Bassists of All Time list, while Thurston Moore is on Rolling Stone magazine's Greatest Guitarists of All Time lists. As far as artists who Sonic Youth have influenced, well, you can start with the group that they brought along as their opening act for their Goo headlining tour back in 1991, an opening band that wasn't well known at that point but was absolutely about to be, Nirvana. In fact, Sonic Youth were instrumental in getting Nirvana signed to DGC Records. That tour, by the way, is part of the documentary film 1991, The Year Punk Broke. You can catch it on one of the streaming services. Might even be for free on YouTube. Double check that, though. Other artists who say that Sonic Youth influenced them include My Bloody Valentine, Pavement, Radiohead, Beck, Dinosaur Jr., Blur, Hole, and Death Cab for Cutie. What makes Sonic Youth hall-worthy is that they helped to influence a few different rock genres. The group started out in New York City as a no-wave rock band, but then they stayed an indie band throughout the entire 1980s, releasing 6 full-length albums starting in 1983 until they signed with a major record label and released their landmark album, Goo, in 1990. Goo happens to be my favorite album. That's the one with Cool Thing on it. Awesome song. They then helped to influence indie rock, noise rock, and alternative rock music. They did it by essentially messing around with the guitar, by changing the guitar's timbre with things like drumsticks. They also tuned the guitar strangely to give it that noisy sound that especially helped to influence grunge music. As far as the reasons that some people give for not putting them in, well, probably the one that people use the most is that Sonic Youth is not recognizable, even though they are critically acclaimed. Well, no one knew who MC5 were, and they're still in, although it took forever, mind you. Other people use the excuse about the group not being commercially successful. Well, they were an independent group, so those people need to have a better definition of the word successful. Still, another reason is that the Hall voters don't really like alternative rock artists because their idea of rock music is essentially, well, let's be blunt, hard rock. They don't seem to like progressive rock, heavy metal, or alternative rock. Go figure. I mean, just look at how long it took them to put in artists like Soundgarden, Yes, and Rush, and they have yet to put in Alice in Chains, Motorhead, and Iron Maiden, 3 groups who should have been in years ago. And in some cases, decades ago. As far as whether people would go see them in concert again or listen to a new album, the answer, I think, is yes. Does their critical acclaim and influence over what became the driving force of music in the 1990s earn them a place in the Hall? My thought is yes. However, I'm not sure that it's going to happen anytime soon. The history of the Hall voters says that they probably won't even make it onto a list for consideration for a little while. The way I think of it is like this. The group T-Rex influenced late 60s and early 70s glam rock, but it took until 2020 for them to finally get into the Hall. Figure that the Hall voters who grew up on 90s music won't be entrenched into the majority of the voting camp for at least another, let's say, 5 years or so by now. Therefore, they'll go through the popular 90s bands first before they ever get to the bands who really influenced 90s music, like the Pixies and Sonic Youth. Do Sonic Youth deserve to be there? Absolutely. Their influence on 90s music, however subtle it may look to the general public, cannot be ignored. Sonic Youth absolutely deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but that's just my opinion. What's yours? Leave it in the comments down below. Play nice. Yes, we know the Hall sucks. I say it every single time. Because it does. Let's be blunt. It does. But it needs to get better, and here's where it starts, by listening to people like you and I. And that is it for who deserves to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We also invite you to check out our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast, where we go over what happened on that date in music history. That podcast drops daily, including weekends, on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. We also have the Music History In-Depth podcast, where we go more in-depth into the events that happened for that week in music history. And that podcast posts every Tuesday on this channel that you're either watching or listening to this podcast on. Thank you very, very much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube or Spotify.